Welcome, 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 everybody. So happy to see so many folks joining in. We'll wait a minute as that number keeps going. Thank you for being with us. So we've got just half an hour here together today. I'm Madeleine Thakur, President and CEO of the Children's Movement of Florida, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2026 Legislative Debrief of the Children's Movement. As we get started here and we've got about 150 of you here so far to hear this update and engage in what's happening in Tallahassee. Just wanted to invite everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat. It's always good to see where folks are tuning in from, what perspectives you're bringing here, and we love to see those energy and ideas flowing in the chat. We just ask you not use this place to solicit. Um, so you all, I think, know the Children's Movement of Florida. We exist to champion the policies and investments that support children and their families in the first 5 years. And one of the most important things that we do is engage in the legislative process, educating elected officials about what's happening, working with you in your communities all across the state to elevate what you're up to and making those connections from state to local and back to the state. So what we are up to today, we wanted to take a moment first to discuss the passage of HB 765. Actually, it was a Senate Bill 1690 that passed on childcare and early learning. This was the largest piece of legislation that we followed in focused on the 0 to 5 years. We also want to talk about budget changes affecting Florida's youngest children, and then the impact of the special session on property taxes. And so you'll see three other faces join us as we go through this. We'll start with Representative Fiona McFarland, who was the sponsor of the big bill, I'll say, that we followed. And then my colleague Daniela Borroto, who is our Director of Policy, will walk us through the budget and what happened there. And then Jim Hodge, who's the president and CEO of the Children's Trust, will join us at the end to talk about property tax. So first, let me introduce Representative Fiona McFarland, who you see here on screen. She is the representative for District 73 in Sarasota, and she's worked all over the world between the U.S. Navy and the Naval Reserves. She's tackled business and operational challenges with Fortune 500 companies in her time at McKinsey. And when she's not making policy in Tallahassee, she tackles the biggest task of all as mother to 4 children under age 6 at home in Sarasota. So perhaps no surprise there that childcare has been on the agenda for you, Representative. Welcome. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you
Um,
so much for having me.
yes. So we've got, let's see, about 175 folks now here to hear from you. Um, I mentioned at the top of the program, we had a major piece of legislation pass on childcare and early learning. What'd you get done? What was this bill and what's its impact?
Well, as Madeline said, I came to the legislature with a bunch of different backgrounds and policy ideas that I wanted to work on, like technology and transportation. And then during my time in office, I decided to have 4 children in a period of 6 years. And so it changed my focus entirely. And I am so excited that there's 178 people that are in the early learning space because uh somehow when I was a new working mom starting out, to me it felt like I was the only working mother who had ever tried to figure out how to make childcare work both financially and logistically. And I brought all of my experience to the legislature and have sponsored some legislation relating to childcare every year since being in office. And I think I wrote my first bill idea on the back of a napkin, and the children's movement found me, and they were like, "Hey, we see you. Would you like to work together?" And it's been a fantastic partnership. So much of the legislation that I have sponsored has had words and ideas and stories that are crafted by the children's movement and all of the constellation of partners, which I'm so thankful for. A few years ago, Madeline and I worked together to create the child care tax credit. There are so many different areas of early learning that we could focus on, but the element of it that had my attention was working families. And I had seen in my experience, whether it was in the military or in the corporate world or even in the legislature, that employers that wanted to partner with their employees on child care were the workplaces that were happiest. It was the workforce that was the most engaged. From the employee's perspective, the data was showing us that employees were staying, retention was higher, right? So turnover was lower, and referrals were up, right? Other moms telling other moms that this is a place that you can bring your child to work and they have childcare on site. And frankly, even people passing up on a higher paycheck or a higher salary elsewhere in order to have this benefit. That was really, really compelling. So we worked together to create a childcare tax credit, and it took us a couple years. But we finally, 3 years ago, passed a bill that created the child care tax credit in the state of Florida. So any employer that wants to partner with their employees in two ways. One is providing a monthly monthly support for childcare costs, can claim that as a tax credit. Or if an employer wants to build their own, right? My ultimate goal was to inject more supply of childcare into the marketplace to help bring costs down. So if an employer wants to build an on-site childcare, there's a tax credit available to them, letting them know that the state is willing to partner with them. We took it one step further to say that an employer that builds their own on-site childcare that's operated for their employees' children and grandchildren can be license exempt, right? The same status that our faith-based providers have. And that was a real carrot for a lot of employers. Now, in the first year that we had this tax credit on the books, Department of Revenue reported to me that $800,000 of tax credit was claimed. In year two, it went up to $1 million. And in year three, we were like right about that 1.3, if my numbers are recalling to me, but we've seen growth year over year, right? And that tells me that that's $1 million that a parent is not spending on childcare costs, and that's a huge victory. I wanted to take it one step further though, because something that I was hearing over and over again was the nonprofits wanted to participate. The nonprofits really wanted to have some help with childcare. Same thing from educational institutions, whether it was the K through 12 setting or higher ed, really, really saw the benefit of helping their employees with childcare. And, if you're a nonprofit or you're a school, you're not paying taxes in the state of Florida, so there was nothing really there for them. So again, we worked together in this past legislative session, and the bill that you saw on the screen at the outset, we went the philanthropic route. So we created a little carve out, a little early learning fund at the Education Foundation that is specifically for anyone that wants to contribute towards childcare in the state of Florida. And we made it super broad and open. And I'll just, a few examples of what I hope happens. I hope that some company that hires people in Florida, that has a big presence in Florida, says, I want to, maybe it's a hospital network that says, I want to incentivize nurses in this county. So I'm going to give philanthropically, right? We'll get the giving credit. I want to give philanthropically to the Early Learning Fund to direct through the ELC of whatever county this is to help employees with the cost of childcare. Another way that employers can partner with their employees. And the benefit for them, for the employer in giving them this way is it doesn't have to trigger a tax event, right? Like what we heard from many employers was that if they offer childcare, it's either a taxable event for them or it's viewed as a benefit, right? So that was disincentivizing them from wanting to offer this benefit on their HR, marketing slick. So we thought that this could be another way that they can give philanthropically, but still help those parents. Thank God for all our ELCs out there we were trying to figure out logistically and structurally how the funds could flow. But the ELCs are already out there. The ELCs already know the families that are in their communities. They've got the plumbing and the infrastructure to be able to handle funds and distributions in this way. And so ELCs, I don't know if you guys know this, but we put you on the hook for this. Um, my job now is to grow that early learning fund in the same way that we've grown the child care tax credit, which is getting the word out. So if you have any employers in your area or anyone who is passionate about supporting early learning, please let them know that they can give philanthropically in this way, with really, almost a no strings attached way to help families with the cost of childcare. Now, this is not to supplant school readiness. This is not to supplant VPK. This is to put more options on the board for parents who are out there trying to find a good learning environment for their child, as they are working themselves, or just help with growing those young minds to make our young learners kindergarten ready.
I love that. I love the way you tell that story of continuity of like, how do we bring more funding into the system that can serve more families? And you describe the $1 million parents aren't spending, and now this potential of how much more parents won't be spending. But I also think about, I hope my memory is right on this. The first time we tried to do the tax credit, there was a provision in that bill to protect family childcare homes and address a couple of other things that also finally got done this year. So what else was in your bill that you're excited about?
Yeah, sorry, I focus on the things that were the most difficult to get done, and there was so much else that we ended up putting in this bill. The way that we work structurally is the title of the bill dictates what you can put into it. So sometimes the title of the bill is really, really specific. It's like, an act relating to red shirts that are worn on Thursdays in the sixth month of the year, and that's the only subject area that you can cover in that legislation. But my bill is always called an act relating to childcare and early learning. So if it touches children in any way in their learning environment, we're able to put it in there. Okay, right? I'm focused on availability of care. And as I had these small babies, infant care, we all know this, infant care is super hard to come by because it's the most expensive for providers to be able to offer, and therefore it's the most expensive to parents. But as I looked around Sarasota County, there many infant care options were happening at family care home settings. So I started talking to some of the family care home providers and learned about some of the struggles that they had. Now, one is just the terminology, whether you're a family care home or a large family care home provider, was tripping up a lot of the regulatory classifications, whether it was locally at home, with their local counties or at the DCF level. So we helped alleviate some of those burdens for them. We got rid of the paperwork that is just causing operators all of this headache, but is truthfully not contributing to safety or quality of education. And the one that I always talk about is the flu brochure.
Mm.
As I finally found my preschool in Sarasota, I'm, filling out the entry paperwork, and there was the form that I had to sign that said, the 2006 legislature in all of their wisdom decided that 40 Carrots Preschool has to tell you that your child could get the flu in August and what's the other, like August and April or something, like twice a year paper. And if your preschool doesn't have this on hand when DCF comes to inspect 3 times a year, they're going to get a red dot. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Me signing this piece of paper has not changed my behavior as a parent.
Mm.
It hasn't made me any more or less likely to get a flu shot or make them wash their tiny little hands more often. The only thing it's done is like stress me out about more paperwork, and it's an administrative burden for my school. So that was the first thing we got rid of. We got rid of it for family care home providers as well, so that they have, even that's such a small example, but death by a thousand
Yeah.
cuts in some cases. More time that these providers can focus on helping families, helping kids. Um, we also heard from a lot of family care home providers that their residential insurance was dropping them. We all know that insurance in the state of Florida is a market that is barely surviving. For family care home providers, we were hearing often that their residential policy was dropping them, not because the age of the roof, not because they had had a hurricane or a flood or any other reason other than they were operating a family care home,
Yeah.
which they are insured for separately under an occupational insurance line. So we shored that up to make sure that a residential insurance company could not drop a home just because there's children present. That was a huge win. Um, we also did something that it was hard for me to convince some of my fellow legislators that this was important, but hopefully this audience gets it. All throughout our state law, the terminology is daycare. And even as I
Was.
talk to some of my policymakers
Right.
at the county and local level, some of the older generation out there just thinks about daycare. Daycare, daycare, daycare. It's a place where you drop off a little baby. They're in a crib. Who cares? There's no learning happening. But we changed the terminology to childcare. Small things, switching from daycare to childcare. But I think it sends a really strong message for people who pay attention to these things, that we recognize the value of that learning that happens at the very early ages, and it's childcare. It is not just daycare. It is it's a professionalized industry. It is so important for our young minds. It is so helpful for parents, everything.
Yeah.
Um, I know you want to ask me questions, but I'm just so excited to talk about childcare with people who understand it that I want to keep going.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
the
Well,
other thing
time is at a premium here. We promised folks we'd have them out of here in half an
Yes,
hour.
okay, you're right.
So you want to share one last closing comment
We need to continue working on, but here's what we got in the bill. We created the center, what do we end up calling it? The
for
Center,
professional recognition?
yes, the Center
And we
for
can pull up a
Professional
slide, I
Recognition.
think, that shows folks exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, to do what Ashley Hughes just chatted, which is professionalize the industry.
Yes.
Right? We hear from providers all the time that investing in preschool teachers and childcare practitioners is so difficult because you invest all this time in training up someone and you lose them to the elementary school. Or you're trying to get that fresh graduate and they have so many different options for where they can work for, I don't know, like 15 to $20 an hour. And either we're not getting them or we're not keeping them because of the professional learning journey just doesn't seem compelling. Hopefully, this center will be moving forward to allow us to attract, retain the best young teachers that we can have in our childcare professional industry.
Perfect. So there you have it, direct from the bill sponsor of everything we have to celebrate in this bill. We put up your face, Representative, alongside Senator Alexis Calatayud because it's clear that you're bringing this advocacy as you described to your colleagues. And what we hope the audience here heard is two things. Number one, how you're listening in community. You say you heard the center directors come to you with this concern. You heard family childcare come to you with this concern. And the second thing is, as I was scrolling through the chat to see who's here, we've got United Ways and other nonprofits. We've got a milk bank. We've got academics. We've got judges or folks from their office. We have foundations. We have folks working in early intervention. And I think you've invited them all to be ambassadors for what's possible when we continue to look at early learning and how do we serve more children. So we'll have to cut it there today. But thank you always for your willingness to join the field and share directly what's going on. And I'll echo the chat in thanking you for your leadership in taking on these issues. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
And you all have this document here. We'll send a recap after this as well. But let me turn it over to Daniela to do a speed round on the budget before we invite Jim to join us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. As Medline mentioned, I will do a speed round on the budget. And this year, although we experienced a slight reduction in the early learning budget and allocations, we did see steady investment towards our school readiness and VPK programs. And school readiness this year was funded at $1.2 billion. And we did see a slight reduction, as I mentioned. However, the legislature allocated 30.9 million to ensure that the coalitions would not experience a significant budget shortfall. and remove services for families and that we know are so important. When we look at VPK, it was funded at $431 million, where the base student allocation per child was funded at $3,029. And the summer bridge program is continued to be invested in at $2.8 million. We also saw some of our partners and their early learning projects funded with who did receive an increase in allocations from 25 to 2026. The TEACH program was funded at $20 million, and the Center for Early Childhood Professional Recognition that Representative McFarland mentioned through House Bill 765 and Senate Bill 1690 was funded at $5 million, supporting our early educators and the workforce across Florida. Home instruction for parents of preschool youngsters, HIPPY, the program that is run through the University of South Florida, was funded at $3.9 million, which truly supports parents and their investment towards supporting their youngest learners. And last but not least, Help Me Grow was funded at $6.5 million, which was a significant increase from what it was funded last year. One thing that I did not mention was the school readiness match, where organizations and private nonprofits and our local counties can contribute to supporting their early learning coalitions in their counties. And that was funded at $30 million as well. We're truly excited to see the significant investments in early learning, and we hope to see an increase next year again. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela. And now we'll shift gears to the third thing we wanted to talk about today, which is the special session on property taxes and what's next there. And so I'll invite Jim Hodge, President and CEO of the Children's Trust in Miami, to join me. Jim began his career as an educator for students with disabilities, and he's been committed to community service and social impact throughout his career, going from that educator to a principal to an assistant superintendent, and now this work as the leader of the trust. So, Jim, there was a lot of conversation this session on reducing property taxes for Florida residents, finding solutions for that. Now we know there's a referendum that's going to the voters in November. What's in that referendum?
Madeline, thanks for having me. Appreciate your leadership in the children's movement and your team. And it's nice coming out the 4th of July weekend in the middle of summer to have 200 plus folks here who are child advocates across the state. So yeah, we had a lot of news and a lot of buzz the last several months. The legislature advanced a constitutional amendment that's going to expand Florida's homestead property tax exemption only if we approve it by 60% of the voters in the November 3rd election. And so November 3rd, if they do approve it, there's a couple things that what the impact would be exempts the first $250,000, right? Currently it's $50,000 exemption, but exempts the first $250,000 of a homestead value from taxation for all levies other than school districts. It's scheduled to have a full elimination down the road, but the increase will begin January 2027, January 1st, 2027. And then work its way up from 150,000 to the following year to 250,000. The other big impact, I mean, that's a significant impact, at least in Miami-Dade and all the children's services. But the other one, they reduced the assessment cap on non-homestead properties and businesses from 10% to 5%. And just from the trust perspective, that'll hinder our revenue for the first year about $3 million, all the way to the fifth year to about $17 million that we bring in. So you have the exemption, and then you have the business, the property and business from 10 to 5% cap, which hinders us. And then it requires part of the requirement, new Florida residents after January 1st, 2027, they have to wait 5 years before they receive this exemption. And it also restricts county municipalities for what they can, what services they can or cannot provide.
Yeah. Well, I know, you and your colleagues across the state who may be called the Children's Trust or maybe called Children's Services Councils. Right now, it's about 80% of children are covered by a district that has one, and you're serving children from birth all the way through 18 or 21. Talk more about what the fiscal impact would be on Children's Services Councils, and for an audience that cares deeply about Florida families, what should they understand about the trust, how you're funded, why it was created, and your role in the community?
Yeah. So again, we understand that people do need relief. So when we talk about the homestead exemption, we understand the affordability in Florida and everything else. So what we were trying to do is really just educate. What's the impact if you vote yes and you vote no? The Children's Trust was founded from a referendum, and most of us, the majority of the CSCs throughout Florida, have been to the ballot twice. Collectively, all of us, what you stated, Madeline, 80% of us, we serve 80% of the children's populations in our local communities. Under the proposed reform, the estimated fiscal impact would reduce our children council revenues by approximately 92.1 million. So that's $92.1 million that's taken out of Florida to support children and families, and
Every
they're
year, you're
every
saying.
year, annually. And it's increased the Children's Trust, and I'm just going to speak from my lens. So we put out approximately 236 million annually in evidence-based programs to support children and families. If this hits, we will lose approximately 28 to 34 million dollars when it gets to 250,000 exemption. And then I spoke about then there'll be the revenue hit from the property tax side from a 3 million to a 17 million dollar. So it's significant. It's significant to support what the voters we went to our community twice to say, would you want to be taxed? We went twice. We went in 2003. We came back. We went back in 2008, the worst financial time in our history, in our generation, and the voters approved us 86%. So I think people know that the value of prevention, the value of getting in early, and the value of early child care is important. Our community has supported them.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing some comments in the chat about
Mm,
voting, and I just want to be clear, we're not advocating
right.
one way or
Okay.
another. We just want folks to know what this means. And I think perhaps in the interest of time, the last question I might ask you is, not everyone understands how the investments you're making locally can multiply. Like you're taking a dollar that comes in, but what would you say about how that looks in Miami of a dollar is not just a dollar at the Children's
Yeah,
Trust?
yeah, one of the greatest strengths about all CSCs, but I'm going to speak specifically about Miami, is that our ability to use our fund to leverage additional dollars through partnerships, through drawdowns. So at the trust alone, our investment into school matches, we bring down 1.23 million in local match funding, which leverages an equivalent amount of additional funding to support school readiness, childcare, and families, about 375 slots in Miami-Dade. In addition, we matched 200, almost $3 million, which leverages 43 million in early Head Start in Miami-Dade County, which is 2,000, about 2,300 spots. So our investment, our $10 million investment we put in the community leverages almost 60 million in drawdown funds. If that gets evaporated, you're not losing at 10 million, you're losing at 60, and that's just in Miami. There's a compounding effect across the state and the impact across the state.
Yeah. And I know this was a big deal when you first went to the voters, but for folks who don't have children of their own, why does this matter?
Yeah, the nice thing as we've been going through this the last several months is we've had partners come out throughout the community and put op-eds throughout the state about the value of the Children's Trust. We had a beautiful article, an op-ed written by our state attorney and public defender that since the trust was created, currently we have in our after-school program, we have 47,000 kids in our after-school and summer programs. That's 47,000 kids off the street. Crime has plummeted in Miami-Dade since the trust has taken over. So all the services that we do on cheaper at a much earlier age has a significant impact throughout the community. So I think there's an awareness that people are moving to Miami, people are moving to Florida, but specifically speaking to Miami, it has been because of 20 or 30 years we work to make Miami safe, to invest in children and families, to have a great community. So we don't want to be short-sighted and not to invest and be able to, as people go to the polls, I just want people, again, we're not suggesting one way or the other. I just encourage everyone to be educated as you go to the polls of what the impact is. And that's just on the trust, not on the municipalities and the services that municipalities and government serve as well.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
thank you very much,
Thank
Jim,
you.
for that. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll
Yeah.
follow up with those who are asking for more
Mhm.
information. I will just thank you again for joining us, and we'll pull up a couple of things to end here. We know 30 minutes is a speed round. We hope you will call us with more questions, and you can reach me or Daniela. We encourage you all to take the All In Pledge. You'll see we've got some resources on our website for the upcoming election to make sure you're registered in the same way we talk about no matter who you are voting for. These are the folks who get to make the decisions on policy and investment. And so make sure your voice is heard, same on the referendum. But if you take the pledge all in for early learning, we'll be able to show the next legislature just the power of this and how many Floridians are invested in keeping this issue on the agenda. We also have a series of First 1,000 Days policy chats on issues like early learning for infants and toddlers, early intervention, and a few others that you'll find there. And you can get all of our weekly updates if you don't yet and sign up here. So we know this was just a taste and a speed round of what happened in 2026, but we're so glad to see the energy from all of you and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.